I always thought our life together was perfect. James and I had known each other for years, and after a whirlwind romance, we got married. Soon after, we had Matt, our beautiful son. From the outside, everything looked exactly as I had always imagined it would. We had a lovely home in a quiet suburb of Chicago, a comfortable routine, and plans for the future. James worked hard at his job in a big IT company, and I stayed home with Matt, taking care of him and the house. I was doing everything I thought I was supposed to be doing. I was a good wife, a good mother, and on the surface, everything seemed ideal. But the more time passed, the more I began to feel like something was missing. I tried to ignore it at first. Maybe it was just postpartum hormones, or the challenges of adjusting to motherhood. But as Matt grew older, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. When Matt was born, I thought life would be perfect. I imagined endless days of playing with him, cooking family dinners, and just basking in the joy of raising our child together. But James seemed distant. It wasn't that he didn't love us. I could see how much he cared for Matt, and he was certainly a good provider. But the more time passed, the more I felt alone. I tried to fill the silence with chores, with baby giggles, with the normal things mothers do, but it never felt enough. I would spend hours playing with Matt, doing laundry, cooking meals, all while hoping that James would come home and sweep me off my feet like he used to. But he didn't. By the time he walked through the door at night, he was too tired to notice that something was missing between us. He'd kiss Matt on the cheek, ask me how my day went, but it felt robotic, like we were just going through the motions. The affection that once felt effortless between us had become forced. And maybe I should have been more understanding. I knew that James was busy with his career, that work was demanding, and he was doing it all for us. But the truth was, the more he became absorbed in his job, the more distant he grew. I could feel it every time we were together. Or rather, when we weren't together. It was like we were living parallel lives that didn't quite intersect anymore. I tried to tell myself it was just a phase. New parents go through this, right? It's normal to be exhausted and overwhelmed. But with each passing day, I began to wonder if there was something deeper going on. I started to question whether we'd lost that spark. And worse, I started to doubt if I could ever feel the same way about him again. At some point, I realized I wasn't just missing the closeness in our relationship. I was missing myself. I used to have passions, interests, things that made me feel alive. Now, all I was a mother and a wife. I loved Matt with all my heart, of course, but sometimes I felt like I was disappearing into the role of being just a mom. I wasn't sure if I was still the person I used to be. The person James fell in love with. When I was offered a work trip to Los Angeles, I wasn't sure how to feel about it. It would be my first time away from Matt for an extended period. But there was something about the idea of getting away that was both exciting and terrifying. I was going to miss my son more than I could even imagine, but I also knew I needed this. I needed to clear my head. I needed to breathe. I told James how nervous I was about leaving Matt, and he assured me it would be fine. He promised he would take care of everything at home, that he was looking forward to spending some quality time with our son. And maybe it was just the weight of everything building up inside me. But when I left, I felt a strange sense of relief. Not because I didn't love Matt, but because I felt like I could finally take a breath. I could be Emma again. Not just mom. Not just wife. Just me. The thought of stepping away from the everyday chaos, even for a few days, felt like a gift I didn't even realize I needed. The flight to Los Angeles felt long and drawn out, but it also gave me space to think. I wasn't sure what I was expecting from this trip. I wasn't going for a vacation or a break from my life. I was going because I had to be somewhere else for a while. The idea of being in a new city, even for work, felt like a chance to reset, to remember who I was before I became buried in the titles of wife and mother. I didn't know it at the time, but that trip would change everything. The first evening I was there, I met up with Tom, a colleague from another branch of the company. We'd worked together on a few projects, and I'd always liked him, but we'd never spent much time together outside of work. That night, we went out to dinner, just the two of us. Tom was charming, funny, and a great conversationalist. It was easy to talk to him, and for the first time in months, I felt like someone was really listening to me. The more we talked, the more I felt like I was reconnecting with something inside of me. I didn't feel like James's wife, or Matt's mom. I felt like Emma again. We laughed and joked, and for a brief moment, It felt like I was free from everything back home. When dinner ended, Tom suggested we grab a drink at a nearby bar. I hesitated at first, but something inside me, some long-lost part of me, told me to go. We found a quiet spot, and the conversation flowed easily. But as the night wore on, the line between what felt good and what was right began to blur. I felt so alive talking to Tom, and for the first time in ages, I felt desired, truly seen. He was kind, attentive, and made me feel like I mattered. As he brushed my arm casually, I felt a spark I hadn't felt in so long. And that's when it happened. We both knew it was crossing a line, but neither of us stopped. What started as a simple conversation, a friendly gesture, turned into something more. Something I couldn't control. I knew what was happening was wrong, but in that moment, I felt like I had no choice. I needed to feel wanted. I needed to feel something. It was a mistake, I knew that, but I couldn't stop myself. Maybe it was selfish. Maybe it was just desperate. But in the midst of all that loneliness and confusion, I made a choice. And I would have to live with the consequences of it. Even though I didn't know it at the time, the consequences would be far greater than I could ever imagine. The next morning was a blur. I woke up in Tom's hotel room, my head pounding, my heart racing. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. The soft, disorienting light of the early morning filtered in through the curtains. And for a second, everything felt surreal. Then the reality of what had happened hit me like a ton of bricks. My chest tightened with guilt, and I immediately wanted to leave. I wanted to undo everything, go back to being that woman I once was. The wife, the mother. And pretend like nothing had changed. But of course, it had. I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know how to make sense of what had just happened. Was it a mistake? Or had I needed it? In the quiet of that room, I felt a conflict within myself that I didn't know how to reconcile. Tom was still asleep next to me, and I gently slid out of the bed, trying to make as little noise as possible. I didn't want to wake him, and I didn't want to face him, but I couldn't stay there. Not like this. I threw on my clothes and grabbed my phone, seeing that I had several missed calls from James. My stomach sank. It felt like a betrayal, and that's exactly what it was. I couldn't even bring myself to listen to his voicemails. Instead, I texted him, letting him know that I was fine and that the work event had gone late. I didn't know what else to say. How could I explain what had happened? How could I face him now? I didn't hear from Tom until later that day. He texted me saying he hoped I got home safely and that he had enjoyed the night. I responded with something neutral, avoiding anything too personal, not wanting to let him think it meant anything more than it was. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Tom had seen me in a way I hadn't been seen in years. And, truthfully, part of me didn't want to forget that feeling. I didn't want to let it go. The next few days were a blur. I spent my time in LA, trying to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting back to what I had done. I felt like I was walking through the motions, but everything felt wrong. I didn't even know if I was doing this for me or just because I knew I had to get home to James and Matt. When I finally returned home, the atmosphere felt different. It wasn't just the fact that I had been away for several days, it was something more. There was a tension in the air that I couldn't ignore. James had been distant, quieter than usual. He had taken care of everything while I was gone, just as he promised, but it was clear that something was off. I could see the questions in his eyes. He didn't say anything at first, but I knew he was thinking about the last time we spoke on the phone. When I had told him how late the event went. When I didn't mention that I'd spent the night with Tom. James kissed Matt, like always, and asked me how the trip went. But I could tell something was wrong. I could see it in his eyes. The way he looked at me as if he didn't know me anymore. And that was when I felt the first crack in our foundation. It wasn't just the guilt that weighed on me, though that certainly haunted me, but something deeper. It was the fact that I had let myself fall into a moment of weakness. I had let someone else make me feel wanted when I should have been looking to my husband for that. I should have been the one to open up to James, to tell him how I was feeling. But instead, I chose the easy way out. And now I was paying for it. As the evening went on, James and I tried to act normal, but I could feel the distance between us growing. It wasn't that he was mad or suspicious. He didn't accuse me of anything outright, but there was a coldness in his demeanor that I hadn't noticed before. He wasn't his usual self. The man who would hug me when I got home, who would kiss me and tell me about his day. That night, when Matt was asleep, James and I sat down to have dinner. The silence was deafening. Finally, after a long pause, James looked at me and said, "Emma, is everything okay? I mean, really okay?" I froze. The question seemed so simple, yet the weight of it felt like a burden too heavy to bear. I wanted to tell him everything, to pour out my soul and explain the emptiness I had felt, the loneliness that had led me to make the mistake I did. But the words were stuck in my throat. "I'm fine," I said, my voice a little too steady. "Just tired." He didn't seem convinced, but he didn't push me. Instead, he just nodded and took a bite of his dinner. The tension lingered, but neither of us knew how to break it. The next few days passed in a haze. We went about our routines. James working late, me taking care of Matt. But the cracks in our relationship were widening. Every time James looked at me, I could feel him pulling away, even if he wasn't saying anything. I knew he was trying to give me space, but it didn't help. It made things worse. I couldn't stop thinking about Tom, and I couldn't stop feeling guilty about it. I was betraying James, and yet I couldn't figure out how to make things right. How could I fix this? How could I go back to being the wife he deserved, the mother Matt deserved? But deep down, I knew that I couldn't undo what I had done. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I even wanted to. I loved James. I loved Matt. But part of me wondered if what I had with Tom was a glimpse of something that was missing in my life. Something that I wasn't getting from James anymore. As the days went on, I started to feel the weight of this secret crushing me. I didn't know how to talk to James about it, but I knew that sooner or later, he would figure it out. He would sense that something wasn't right. And when he did, everything would change. I never thought it would come to this. The silence between James and me became unbearable. I could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on me with every passing day. I had hoped I could go on pretending. Pretend nothing had changed. Pretend everything was normal. But the lies, even the unspoken ones, had a way of coming to the surface. It was only a matter of time before James figured it out. He was distant. More distant than I had ever felt. There was something in his eyes. A suspicion that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just the way he looked at me. It was the way he didn't look at me. The warmth we once shared seemed to have evaporated. He'd kiss Matt before bed, and then give me a quick peck on the cheek. But there was no lingering touch, no spark. It felt like we were strangers sharing the same space. And the worst part, I couldn't bring myself to talk to him. Every time I tried to say something, the words felt stuck, like I was choking on them. I wanted to tell him everything. About the loneliness, about the mistake I made, about how lost I felt. But there was a fear in me, a fear that I had already destroyed everything. If I told him the truth, would he leave me? Could he forgive me? James had always been so logical, so methodical. So it didn't surprise me when one evening he came home earlier than usual and sat me down in the living room. "I need to talk to you, Emma?" he said, his voice even but strained. My heart was pounding, and I instantly felt a sense of dread. Something was off. I could see it in his eyes, and it made me feel like I was already guilty, even before he spoke. I don't know how to ask this, but I need to know," he continued. He took a breath, and my stomach churned with fear. "Emma, I had a DNA test done." I froze. My chest tightened, and my mind went blank for a moment. The words barely registered. "A DNA test? What the hell are you talking about?" I stammered. James's eyes never left mine. "I needed to know if Matt is my son." I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. And I had to know, Emma. I couldn't live in this fog of doubt. The world seemed to stop for a second, the air in the room thick with tension. A DNA test. I had never expected this, but I knew deep down that he was right to doubt. He had been so distant lately, and I had never been able to be honest with him. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "I've been thinking about this for a while," James continued, his voice quiet but intense. "Ever since you came back from your trip to LA, I felt like you were hiding something. And I've been looking for answers." I wanted to scream, to beg him not to do it. But I couldn't. I had betrayed him. And now he had found the proof. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small envelope with the results of the DNA test. He handed it to me, and my hands shook as I took it. My eyes blurred with tears, but I couldn't stop myself from reading what was written there. The words were clear, undeniable. Results. The DNA profile of Matt Carter does not match that of James Carter. It felt like I had been punched in the gut. All the air left my lungs, and I had to sit down, my hands trembling. I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw nothing but cold, painful truth in his eyes. He whispered, almost to himself. You slept with someone else. And I've been raising another man's child all this time. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to say something, anything, to make it go away. But the reality was undeniable. The test didn't lie. Matt wasn't his son. My world shattered in that moment. The pain in his voice, the hurt in his eyes. It was unbearable. He had trusted me. And I had destroyed that trust, not just with the affair, but with the lie that Matt was his. I never wanted this to happen, I said, my voice breaking. I was lonely, James. I felt like you didn't see me anymore. I felt like I was losing myself. And Tom gave me attention. He made me feel seen. It was a mistake. A horrible, selfish mistake. James stared at me in silence, and I could feel his anger boiling beneath the surface. He wasn't shouting, but every word he spoke was coated in pain. How long, Emma? He asked quietly. How long have you been lying to me? How long have you known? I looked at him, my heart heavy with shame. I didn't know, James. I didn't know what I was doing. But after that night, I didn't know how to face you. I didn't know how to tell you that I had made the worst mistake of my life. He stood up abruptly, walking to the window, his back to me. The silence between us was suffocating. I watched him, helpless, as the weight of the situation hit him like a brick. I don't even know who you are anymore, he muttered, his voice shaking. I don't know who I am, either. How could you do this to me? To us? I couldn't answer him. I couldn't explain the feeling of emptiness I had been carrying around, or the desperation that had led me to make the choice I did. There were no excuses for what I had done. I had betrayed him in the worst way possible. And I knew that no matter how sorry I was, nothing could change the fact that I had broken everything. James turned around, his face pale, and looked at me with such finality that it felt like a knife in my chest. I think we need some space, Emma. I don't know how to move forward from this. I don't know if I even want to try. I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. There was nothing else to say. The damage was done, and there was no going back. The next few days passed in a fog. I tried to go through the motions. Feeding Matt, doing the laundry, cleaning up the kitchen. But it all felt so empty. So wrong. I felt like a ghost in my own life, walking through a house that used to be full of love and warmth, but now felt cold and hollow. James hadn't left. He was still here, but it was clear we were both living in two separate worlds. He wasn't angry in the way I expected him to be. He wasn't yelling, accusing me, or demanding answers. But that was worse. His silence was 1,000 times more painful than any argument could have been. He had shut down, and I could feel the wall between us growing taller and taller with each passing day. He didn't want to talk. He barely even looked at me. I could feel his eyes on me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. But it wasn't the way it used to be. Before, there was warmth in his gaze, even when we didn't say anything. Now, I saw only distance. The man I married was a stranger, and it was all my fault. That evening, I was sitting on the couch, holding Matt, trying to calm him down after a tantrum. James walked past the living room and paused for a moment, just standing there. He looked at me, his eyes tired, sad, almost defeated. I felt my throat tighten as I waited for him to speak, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he took a deep breath and walked away. That was the last time I saw him, without the heavy air of finality hanging between us. I knew it was over. I knew he wasn't going to forgive me. The reality of my actions hit me like a freight train. I had betrayed him in the worst way, and no amount of apologies could undo what I had done. The trust was gone, irreparably broken. The days that followed were agonizing. Every time I looked at Matt, I saw his father's face, the man who had raised him, loved him, cared for him. But I also saw the truth that had been hiding under the surface all this time. Matt wasn't James's son. And even if he had been, that didn't erase the fact that I had cheated, that I had made the choice to lie, to deceive, to betray everything we had built. James didn't speak to me about the DNA test again. He didn't ask me any more questions. He just went on as if we were two strangers in the same house, trapped in a loop of unsaid words. I spent nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining the life I had destroyed. I thought about all the moments we had together. The first kiss, the late night talks, the way he used to look at me like I was the only person in the world. I thought about Matt's first steps, his first words, all of the beautiful memories that I had tainted. And I couldn't stop the flood of guilt. It consumed me, gnawed at me, twisted my insides. But the worst part was knowing that I was the one who had pushed him away. I had done this. I had made the decision to look for something in someone else, when all I had to do was open up to him, to James, to the man who loved me. I could have told him. I could have tried to fix it. But instead, I chose the easy path, and now it was too late. It wasn't until one evening, after putting Matt to bed, that James spoke again. He walked into the living room where I was sitting, staring at my phone in a daze. I looked up when I felt his presence, but I didn't say anything. I couldn't. What was there left to say? I don't know what to do anymore, he said, his voice quiet, broken. It was the first time he had said anything remotely emotional since the confrontation. It felt like he had cracked open a little, and it made my chest ache. I know, I whispered, my voice trembling. I don't know what to do either. He ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted. Emma, you've hurt me in a way I can't even explain. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way. His words hit me like daggers. Every word he said was true, and I had no defense. I had no way to make it right. I understand, I said quietly. I understand if you can't forgive me. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I never should have let it get this far. For the first time since that night, he sat down beside me. There was an uncomfortable silence between us as I waited for him to speak again. When he finally did, his voice was softer, almost as if he were trying to explain something to himself. I don't know what the point of it all is anymore, he said. How do we move forward from this? How do we even begin to fix what's broken? I didn't have an answer. I didn't know how to fix it. And maybe part of me didn't think it could be fixed. I don't think I can stay here, he said after a long pause. I think we need some space. I need space to think. I need to figure out who I am without you, without this lie hanging over us. And I think you need time too, Emma. Time to think about what you've done, about who you are now. The words felt like a knife in my chest. I had known this moment was coming, but hearing him say it out loud, hearing him say it with such finality, made everything real in a way I hadn't prepared for. I wanted to beg him to stay, to promise that things would get better, that I could fix it. But I knew better than that. I knew that the damage was too deep. He stood up, his expression unreadable. I'm going to stay with my brother for a while. I need time to clear my head. I need time away from this, from everything. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I watched him gather a few of his things, pack his bag, and walk out of the house. When the door closed behind him, I felt like the world had collapsed. I was alone. And somehow, that seemed to be the only thing that made sense anymore. The silence that followed his departure was deafening. I stood there, staring at the door, unable to move, to think. The truth was, I had broken everything. My marriage. My family. And now, even though I was left with nothing but regret, nothing but the shattered pieces of the life I had once loved, there was no going back.